Monsieur Anber,
Monsieur Cassavant.
this is the third edition of Calling Russ Anber. As I have a microphone, so that's a step in the right direction.
I was just about to say, now, does that mean you're going to sound better than me? Do I sound okay? Like, I don't know what that sounds like.
I don't think I could ever sound as good as you, but I'll sound better than I've been sounding the next 2 weeks. So I'm competing against myself here, and I'm sounding better than I have in the previous. And we're still working on some of the technical camera kinks. That will be the next step. But it's for people listening. This will be the audio version, and people tuning in on YouTube. We appreciate it, and we're going to be unveiling more and more gizmos, if you will. But our motto is substance over style. And with Russ, we know we're going to get good substance, and we have a lot to get to this week. We're going to get to some topics, including the controversy in the Maloney fight in Vegas this past weekend.
Right.
We're going to get to the fight in locally as well, some local cards upcoming this Saturday. But I want to get to the Terence Crawford fight from this past weekend first and foremost. We're also going to touch on Canelo and Callum Smith officially being agreed upon for December 19th. As you take your sip of tea there, Russ. Terence Crawford, fourth round knockout, TKO officially, but a right jab, kind of right hook punch against Kell Brook, who looked solid in the first few rounds. But when Crawford made some adjustments, he was able to have a decisive victory. So just as first and foremost, your impressions from Kell Brook, who looked good, but you texted me on Saturday night during the fight and said, and texted me along the lines that Brook looks good offensively, but maybe defensively, the wear and tear has just accumulated in his career.
I was just about to give you your props for that. That's how I was going to answer before you stole your own thunder. But you did. You said Crawford's going to win, even when I said Brook is looking good. To me, what this fight showed was that, first of all, Terence Crawford is a great fighter. You can't take that away from him. He is a great fighter. Even when he in fights where he's looked susceptible and he's getting hits, Kavalauskas shook him. When this guy comes back, he comes back, and he has, he certainly has authority in those two fists. He's got a big heart. He's a warrior. He comes to fight. He's ready to go into the trenches, Matt. I think when I was texting you, what I was thinking about was seeing this guy Brook has the style that's going to give Crawford problems, okay? But in order to do that, there's no doubt about it that you've got to go into the trenches. You're going to have to be able to resist what's coming at you. And sadly, in a great career for an action-packed fighter like Kell Brook, I think it's just a case of, just too much mileage on the car. There was just too much mileage that he stood up to bombs from Golovkin. He stood up. It was a middleweight, right? And that might have actually done more damage than we think, right? But he stood up to those bombs and never wavered. And he threw back with a vengeance. He rocked the hell. In my opinion, Kell Brook hurt Golovkin more than Canelo did in 24 rounds. Single shot, boom, hurt like solid, was more solid than what Canelo landed. But I think just the mileage on him, he just didn't have it anymore to be able to physically resist to the shots coming at him. And it's too bad, because I think his style, his patience, I think all that threw Crawford off a little bit. And you'd have to think that, the guy that fought Sean Porter, a Kell Brook in his prime, I'm not saying he beats Crawford, but he doesn't go out the way he just went out last weekend.
No, I agreed. And the Golovkin loss was 4 years ago already. The step up. And the three losses in Kell Brook's career: Golovkin, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. So he's lost to the best of the best.
It's a Hall of Fame resume almost, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if we're going to go Hall of Fame just yet with Spence and Crawford, but they're certainly building their case for it. Golovkin, I think, is looking much at this stage of his career like a lock to be in when you consider all the middleweight title defenses he's made. But
the wheels are going to have to come completely off of Terence Crawford for him not to be into the Hall of Fame. He's going to have to lose to a bunch of guys and get blasted out by guys that diminishes everything he's done so far, because I don't see that happening. I think he's going to keep rolling along and keep winning. And anyway, we'll see that.
Yeah, and he was the undisputed 140-pound title holder, champion. At one point, he had all four belts, even though he hadn't defeated anyone who's a big name. And I think when you look at Terence Crawford, and this brings me to this other point here, is that he's 37-0, 28 wins by way of knockout, 33 years old. But when you look at his resume, some names like Amir Khan and Kell Brook bring name recognition, but he's lacking that legacy fight, that signature win. And him after the fight was very vocal about wanting Manny Pacquiao, who's now with PBC and Al Heyman. So there's no guarantees that I think Pacquiao is going to be able to make that crossover fight with his former promoter, Bob Arum, in Top Rank. And how much of that, the Errol Spence fight, is the fight everyone wants to see, but Errol Spence is fighting Danny Garcia December 5th, and who knows if we're going to see the Crawford Spence fight happen. And Danny Garcia, to me, is a legit underdog in that fight. I mean, he's a legit, I think, chance of winning it. I don't think he should be overlooked completely.
Oh, not
Spence.
at all.
But let's say Crawford and Spence never face each other. Let's say Crawford, the Manny Pacquiao fight doesn't happen. It's been frustrating for him. He's voiced it now that he maybe wants to change. And Bob Arum said he spent a lot of millions on Terence Crawford. I think his exact quote was that he could have built a Beverly Hills home, a house in Beverly Hills, with the amount of money he's given to Terence Crawford in vain, according to him. So do you think that the legacy factor of Crawford, despite all his, in style, his wins, his convincing victories, he's looked like a pound for pound top fighter, but he's lacking that signature win? Do you think that's a problem for him when you look back at his career?
Well, there's no doubt about it, that he's a victim of circumstance in a way, the welterweight that he's moved up, he just hasn't had those. And, I think in a way it reflects as well with Lomachenko, not having to move up to try to get that legacy name, to try to get that, that credibility, by giving people an advantage. And he's moved up to welterweight to do so, and still can't get the guys that are the key names there. So, yeah, I think it's unfortunate. He deserves it. And that's the sad thing though with boxing now, isn't it? Like, right. Yeah. That this should be a no-brainer. Back in the day when King and Arum ruled the roost, right? When a fight would be beneficial to both, as was the case with, Leonard and Duran, you made the fight happen. Like, you get it done. It's good for everybody. Everybody gets paid. That's what you want. That's why you're in the business. It seems now that this isn't about wanting to get paid or doing business. It's about wanting to hurt the competition, about wanting to hurt the opposing promoters, instead of wanting to build it and work together and make the fight happen. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, Spence will fight Garcia, but this should be on their radar, that they should be already talking about it. This is the fight we're making. Everything should be planned about making this fight. And for some reason, it's not happening. And it's discouraging that, it's discouraging. I mean, a few times boxing has gone out of its way to make something like this happen. We have the fights that are aired on both networks at the same time back in the day with HBO and Showtime, Joshua Klitschko, make it happen. And I think that's something that's lacking today. And this should be made. And I feel bad for Crawford because I know he wants those big fights. I certainly don't. I love Bob, but I don't know that airing your dirty laundry in public is necessarily the way to go with Crawford, because if you're on the receiving end of that and you're listening to that, you're saying, okay, well, it's quite clear they don't want me, right? Like, that's pretty, the message, it wasn't vague. It wasn't, he didn't skirt the issue. It was pretty direct what he said. So there must be something more to what we're hearing. Michael Woods wrote a great column on New York Fights, and he wrote a great column giving both sides of the story, Arum and Crawford. And I think there's more to it that we really don't know about. And I urge everyone to go take a listen to that. Woodsy wrote a great column on that. And there's more to it. And, I hope they're able to iron things out. And I hope that he's able to stay with Arum and that Arum is able to make the fight happen, against Spence. Or let's see what happens with Garcia. But yeah, it's got to happen.
Bob's been able to do business. If you look even just prior to the pandemic with Tyson Fury, the rematch, the first fights, it's a conflicting. He's promoting Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder's with Al Heyman and PBC. So it's happened. You've talked about the mutual networks in the past when it was HBO and Showtime. The most recent one that I can recall is the Pacquiao Mayweather huge fight. That won't happen, of course, with I think the networks sometimes are much
Joshua
more.
And Klitschko, the same thing happened.
Yeah, in similar ways. But I think the networks are probably even a bigger factor sometimes. If you're Errol Spence, who's mostly fighting with the PBCs, whether it's Fox pay-per-view or Showtime pay-per-view, are they going to do business with ESPN now, who have the promotional rights. I think that's some things that sometimes is even a bigger detriment than the fighters and the promotional companies. And networks now are a big factor as well.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it is like where does the answer lie there? I'm not sure. Are they a hindrance, or do they want it to happen as well? Do they want to have the exclusivity? Because it's almost as if they're taking it as their own exclusivity. Too bad you're signed with us, and then they turn around and say, well, yeah, they signed. They get paid big money to have you signed to be exclusive. Now you can't go and fight this guy. If we lose, everything goes down the toilet. Or they say, we're going to wait till your last fight, and then we'll do it on your last fight, because if you lose, we got nothing left, blah, blah. I don't know. Maybe they are to blame. Maybe the networks are part and parcel to blame. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to that information without asking. I mean, I could certainly make a few calls and see if that's an issue, but it's not something that readily comes up in my day-to-day conversation of how much the networks influence whether a fight is made or not. I'm sure it must.
And Russ, don't forget that and you may have seen this, but even when PBC puts their welterweight rankings and they have a lot of them. They have Sean Porter, they have Keith Thurman, they have Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, and now Pacquiao. They almost never reference Crawford in their rankings when they put graphics up. So clearly it's a factor. But let's say, I want to move on for 1 second here. Let's say Crawford and Spence were to fight each other. Right now, a lot of people at this poll came about on Twitter after the fight. A lot of times people are prisoners of the moment. It's immediate reaction. It's recency bias. About 70% of people from the different polls I was seeing on Twitter and social media would favor Crawford to beat Errol Spence. Do you think Crawford would deserve, like right now, in your assessment as seeing both fighters, is it because we haven't seen Spence since his big-time car accident? It'll be the first fight against Danny Garcia. Until you've seen him against Garcia, you're not willing to make a statement? Or do you think for sure Crawford deserves to be the favorite against Errol Spence, regardless of how Spence looks December 5th?
Well, I think until Spence comes back today, Crawford's going to have to be the favorite, because, like you said, Spence hasn't fought. He was in a car accident. There's a lot of question marks surrounding him. Crawford has fought, looked good, bang, quick knockout. You have to make him the favorite. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But now this tune might change depending on how Spence looks against Garcia. And I'll tell you what, I'll give full credit, full marks, 1,000% for Spence coming back and fighting Danny Garcia. After that accident, like for him to do that fight, hats off to him, man, because that's not a case of cherry picking at all. Danny Garcia can fight. Danny Garcia comes to fight. I know it's a PBC show, that's fine, but Garcia can fight. Believe me, I saw it, and I saw it up close and personal. I've been in the opposite corner when he's fought. I was in Ivan Redcatch's corner when he fought. I see how good Danny Garcia is. And Danny Garcia is a good fighter. For Spence to take that says a lot about Errol Spence. Says a lot. And if he delivers, it'll say even more.
It would be fun if we get to see sometime in the next 12 months the Thurmans and the Spences and the Crawfords. Now we have Spence Garcia, which is a very good fight. Sean Porter, Pacquiao, they got to be involved and try to fight each other as much as possible. The Thurman-Pacquiao fight was an excellent fight, even though Thurman came up short. We're not really sure what's going on with Keith Thurman at the moment. Manny Pacquiao, he's probably always like one fight away possibly from retiring. He's looked better since the Jeff Horn controversial loss, and they looked very good against Keith Thurman. Look, I think Pacquiao, if Crawford seems to want Pacquiao more, he doesn't seem to think the Spence fight is realistic. Either way, those are the fights I'd like to see. And I do think Errol Spence, Crawford, I think it's more of a toss-up than some people think right now. I think they look at Crawford's performance and they look dominating, but defensively, Crawford can get hit, and he's been hit. And Errol Spence has fought better opposition recently, I would think, than Terence Crawford has.
The reason Crawford has been talking Pacquiao is because Pacquiao brings the numbers. When he brings the numbers, he's going to bring the dollars. I would ask for that fight too. I would want my guy to fight Pacquiao because that's the money fight. That's the cash cow fight. There's going to be significantly more dollars for that than there will be for Spence. Not to say that the Spence fight won't be high. I doubt they're on the same pay scale. I tend to believe that the Pacquiao fight would be on a higher pay scale, because Pacquiao's just that much more of a bigger name. A lot of this is going to, like I said, depend on Spence's performance against Garcia. It really is. And there's different ways this could happen. Matt, listen, Spence dominates Garcia, looks like $1 million, wins 120 on all the cards. Great performance. He goes to war with Garcia in a great fight. It goes back and forth. Danny Garcia is a good fighter. It goes back and forth. He looks good. He wins a close decision. He loses a close decision. Could be a problem. He gets blasted out. Could be a worse problem. I don't expect that to happen. So a lot is going to depend on how the fight goes against Danny Garcia. I think it's really important as to how you can sell that. But at the end of the day, they've got to try to make the fight. They have to be lining up to say, okay, we'll give you Pacquiao, then we'll give you Spence. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how business. I'm offended for boxing by what you said earlier, that PBC doesn't even put it up on their boards to have as if they didn't exist. Treat these guys as if they're non-existent. I think it's bad for the sport. I think all you're doing is wanting to create a cult following of people who just watch your show, and we're just going to ignore the rest. They're not there. Ignore them. They'll go away, and just leave them on the sidelines. And you're not going to play in this game. You're not allowed to get into this, and that's bad. I just don't know how that's good for the sport of boxing.
Something we can't ignore on the undercard, and Bob Arum, his charisma is still there for somebody who's approaching 90. It's unbelievable. On the undercard, it was a big show on ESPN. It did good ratings because it had a lead-in with college football prior to the boxing show, and you had Maloney in the rematch against Joshua Franco. The headbutt, was it a headbutt? Was it not? That was stopped, and they ruled a no decision by Russell Mora, initially ruled an accidental headbutt. They have instant replay now. They were asking the ESPN truck, the commission, to review it. Bennett and the gang, and Robert Byrd was there as well, who I guess is the head official for replay reviews. And Bob Arum was then getting ringside. And after a while, they said, Bob, go away here. It took about 28 minutes to confirm a no decision that almost everybody watching the replay and watching it live could not come up with an actual clear evidence of a headbutt. Your thoughts on that? Bob Arum was obviously clearly upset. He said he would leave Vegas because of this, which I think it's hyperbole on Bob's part because of the bubble aspect. But to me, replay has to be used intelligently. And I don't know why I think pride got in the way here of the referee made a decision. We don't want to make the referee look bad, so we're going to stick with that decision.
I respect Bob Bennett and the Nevada State Athletic Commission. I really do. I think they really try to do the best they can in a sport that's filled with potential outcomes and the possibility of human error. So I, for one, have always been a proponent of the instant replay in any sport, because I don't know any athlete who doesn't want to get the call right. I have never seen anybody question whether the ball was on the line, whether the foot was in bounds, whether he hung on the basket. When you have the visual evidence in sports, hockey especially, that is played at such a fast speed, the fact that millions could be lost on human error, on a call, like on a goal or no goal or something, and you have the technology to make that right and eliminate error and cheating, how can you not have it? So I tip my hat to the Nevada State Athletic Commission for doing that, and every commission should want to do that. And I also understand how it works. Like I've been twice to Vegas. They've explained how the replay system worked. And in fact, Bob Bennett went out of his way to support the call because Mora made the call. He didn't even have to go to instant replay, technically speaking. According to the rules, he didn't have to. He made the call that it was an accidental headbutt. Boom. Then the fight was unable to continue, and fight's over. But Bennett wanted to be right. Did he want to protect Mora? I don't know. I mean, that's obviously what the theory is and what people say. He's protecting his people. Okay, fine. They looked at it and they looked at it and they looked at it.
Yeah,
and
28 minutes is too much, Russ.
What's that?
28 minutes is too much. So that's going to people who argue otherwise, that instant replay kills the flow of sports. You got to be able to make a decision in quicker than 28 minutes. And he's stating that they had made the decision.
Hang on. Yes, of course. But it was 28 minutes after. It wasn't 28 minutes waiting for the fight to start again. The fight was over, so it doesn't matter. They took 28 minutes. At least you're hoping they're going to try to call it right. It's not like they're waiting in between rounds to see if they're coming out for the next round to fight. That's not the case. So they took the time, fine. I question whether, and I would have liked if Bennett would have said, here it is. This is what we saw. This is what, because at one point, I don't know if you saw it, Jay Nady was there. So there was Bennett, Robert Byrd, and Jay Nady. And at one point, he pointed to the screen and said, there it is. They saw something. And it was fleeting. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't a reaction, but they saw something. Now, the question here is, how definitive should it be? And that was my comments on social media, that if you are going to use the replay, unless you can be definitive, you can't call it that. But the referee had already made the call. So by not calling it, you'd be overturning the referee's decision, which is not something that often happens in boxing. And they couldn't get the clear thing to overturn it. And it's almost that they looked, in my opinion, they tried to find something to support his decision instead of saying not clear enough, not definitive enough. There wasn't there wasn't emotion. There wasn't, you didn't see it clearly. Even the ESPN kept showing you the jab landing. Yes. They showed that over and over again, but they couldn't be definitive as to, there was no headbutt. They're trying to show you it wasn't definitive. Now, were they not looking for it because the commentators were on the narrative of, no, there was no headbutt. I know boxing. There was no headbutt, so they didn't, did they look harder for it? Did they go through the whole route? We all saw it, and everybody's claim now is, I didn't see it. There was no headbutt. They're protecting the referee. A few pictures have come out, still shots, which show where the two fighters are really close together and their heads touching like this. That doesn't mean a still photo doesn't mean there was impact of the head. It could have been, they could have just been close like this and actually never had a shot, So
as your experience as a cut man, because I was talking to some coaches and some other people in boxing, the way Franco's eye swelled up, it almost looked like it would have to have been by a punch. Usually it would be a cut from headbutts. We see that a bit more, but the swelling and the thickness of the swelling, do you think that theory is right? Or you could have a big time swell, an eye starts swelling up even by an accidental headbutt and not just a punch?
Well, I heard that he suffered a broken cheekbone. Is that correct?
Well, I think he was thumbed officially, though. And then the extent of the orbital bone injury, I can confirm. If that's what you heard, I'm going to go with that.
Let me tell you, the jab that they're talking about, without saying, and I hate to use the word thumbed, because you can't thumb somebody now with attached thumb gloves. Okay, the gloves are attached.
Which some people did not know. People thought that it was like the MMA world where you can get disqualified or penalized for that, but because it's attached, it's an accidental.
You cannot do that.
Foul.
Now, can the corner edge of the glove hit you in the eye with your eye and catch you with your eyelid open, where you didn't get your eyelid closed in time and it hits the socket, it hits the eyeball? It happened to Otis Grant against Willie Monroe. He got hit with an uppercut. He bent down and bent right into an uppercut, and it caught his eye, and the eye swelled instantly. He fought with one eye the rest of the fight, won the fight. But if you go back and look at that fight, Otis Grant against Willie Monroe, you'll see the eye. Okay, it happened.
But from a punch, not from a headbutt.
I'm sorry?
From a punch, not from a headbutt.
From a punch, not from a headbutt. That was clear, no doubt about it. Now, this could have happened from that. It definitely could have happened from that.
Okay, but could it have happened from a headbutt is what I'm asking, though. Could a headbutt give you that type of swelling? Especially if it's a glancing headbutt and not a major foul, which we've seen in the past. This was.
I hate to never say never, but for you to have to have caused that type of swelling with a headbutt, that would have had to be evident. Like it would be something very hard to miss. It would be something very hard to miss. Now, again, they're 118 pounders, 122,
118.
118. Things happen fast. It happens fast.
Correction, actually 115 junior bantamweight.
115. Things happen fast. You don't, did they miss it? My take on this, Matthew, is that you need instant replay. Please don't use that. I don't want anyone to use this this platform of what happened to Maloney as something to say ban instant replay. We need instant replay. We have to assume that Bob Bennett, who I know is an honorable guy, he has no personal gain as to whether Maloney wins or Franco wins. There's no personal gain for him. Russell Mora made the call. Bird, Bennett, and Jay Nady confirm on video that they saw something, but they never actually released what it is that they saw, which should have been, I think that would have made their case to say, at 2:08 of the first round, this is what happened. This is where the headbutt occurred, and we believe this is what caused. But as soon as you say we believe, as soon as you say we think, as soon as it's not definitive that foul was a result of the injury was a result of that foul, that's where you have to go on the side and say, no, there's no video evidence, there's no definitive support to say that he got hit with a foul blow and it should have been ruled legal. That's my take on it. Could there have been, did they get close? Is it here? Yes, they freeze frame a picture where they're close, but did they actually hit? Was there something that caused it to happen? That was what they couldn't find. So if you can't find that, if you can't see the puck go over the line, if you can't see where it lands on the foul line, you can't make the call via instant replay. That's how I feel, to be fair. That's just fair to everybody, because I think it's fair to Franco. I think it's fair to Maloney. You have to give the benefit of the doubt that if you can't see it, you can't make it up and try to find it in the video and say, maybe that could have caused the damage. There's no doubt that the jab looked like it did. That was the most definitive thing you saw. If anything, that was the most definitive thing right to the eye that you saw.
Right. Well, look, I think there'll be a third fight now. The storyline is there. And Maloney looked very good. That's what I think was kind of hard and gut-wrenching for him. He looked like he was on his way probably to winning the fight. At least he had dominated the early portions of it, but it was still an early fight.
That's not fair. And the ESPN commentator said the same thing. He was dominating and on his way in the first fight. He was winning, and the fight started to come off, later, and Franco came on. So that's not enough to say, he was off to the races,
Fair enough.
Yeah, he was working. Okay, he worked in the first fight and was winning the first fight as well before he got, before Franco started to come on. And then, you could see rounds slipping away, and now Franco's starting to pick up momentum. So I don't like to use that, but just fairness, just be fair. We have the technology, you have it there, use it as best as you can. I feel gutted for both of them. And sometimes you catch a break doing this. I think everybody would have been hurt if they would have said he wins, and a guy wins the title on a jab to the eye that closed his eye in the second round. A guy loses his title, on one punch. Like, that doesn't prove you're better than the other guy after going 10, 12 rounds the last time. That doesn't prove anything. What, an exchange of jabs, the eye closed, it's over. Well, okay, that's not any better. It doesn't make it better that he wins that way. But it would have been bad for Franco as well to lose his title like that.
All right, so hopefully we see a third fight. Let's move on here because we have a few minutes left. Canelo last week, we talked about the Callum Smith rumors. Now it's official. December 19th, first fight for Canelo since his big knockout win against Sergey Kovalev. He's going back down to 168 at super middleweight, which is probably at this stage of his career his best weight. I don't think middleweight he's going to go back down unless there's a super fight there. He's going to probably stick at 168 or 175. What about the aspect, and I'm hearing, and I kind of agree with this, that 4 weeks out for Canelo, who has been training for a while, he wanted to be fighting before the end of the year, despite the contract issues. You saw him in shape. You see the videos training with the Reynosos and Ryan Garcia. For Callum Smith, though, only 4 weeks notice for a super fight, the biggest fight of his career in the middle of a pandemic. Do you think that's unfair, or do you know anything about his preparation that most people don't know?
He's been on the short list, so they've been preparing. The official word wasn't given, but he's been on the short list. Of course, it's difficult to prepare and be motivated when you're really not sure. But they were confident that they brought the hardware to the table that was going to make Canelo's return the most lucrative against Callum Smith. Caleb Plant was a possibility. Yildirim didn't bring anything to the table, and people kind of like everybody, the boxing world said, no, that's not the fight they're interested in. Callum has a title. He's a big guy. It's a compelling matchup, big guy, small guy matchup. So they had always been aware that they were on a short list. And I know Callum, and he did his homework in staying ready. So yes, publicly it's announced as 4 weeks notice. For all we know, Canelo knew all along that he's going to pick Callum Smith as the opponent and trained accordingly for that, knowing he's not going to, okay, I'm not fighting Yildirim, I'm not fighting Caleb Plant. He knew he's going to fight him. Officially, it's announced 4 weeks out. And really, when you think of it, it's less than 4 weeks, because you have to consider that Smith is going to have to travel a 6-hour, 7-hour time zone change, so
For
he's
Texas?
going to be,
yeah.
I'm sorry?
He's going to Texas for the fight.
To Texas. So he's going to leave the UK 10 days before the scheduled date. So he's actually going to finish up his last 3 weeks of preparation, and he's heading to the States. So it's really not even 4 weeks notice, because you can't take it as notice from when the fight is. You have to take notice as fight week, when his fight week will begin, because he has to travel and get there. So it's not like you're training. So training is done by then. So he has actually publicly and officially less than 4 weeks notice for the fight. So, it is a task. But if you're in Callum Smith's position, you're his manager, Matt. No, I'm not taking that. The 3 weeks notice. I don't want that fight. Okay, well, this was the money you're going to be offered. Now you're going to fight for half that in your next fight. You can't do that. He has to take it.
What can he do better? Because in the John Ryder fight, which is Callum Smith's last fight about a year ago as well, won a decision, but it was a tougher fight than we expected, and maybe he didn't look his best. The George Grove performance was clearly better a few years ago. Is that what you think we need to see from Callum Smith? More of the Callum Smith we saw in the last few fights compared to the John Ryder? Are we writing this off as a one-off, or is there concern that his performance may not be the way it was a few years ago?
Let me preface this with this. John Ryder is a hell of a fighter. John Ryder, to me, is a guy that should fight in black and white. Like, he is a throwback.
A throwback, yeah.
He's a throwback guy. Like, his style, he's a smaller guy, but can sit right in the inside and work. He hustles on the inside. He works back. He doesn't back away for no reason. He's got good skills. He'll sit right there with bombs coming out. I like the way he fights, okay? When you have a guy that can fight that good in that style, and then you have another fighter like Callum, who's coming off some dominating wins. And listen, his wins have been dominating. Hassan Ndam, George Groves. I mean, they have been crushing victories, okay? Like, he has looked unbeatable. He looked great in those fights. You coming off fights like that, it's sometimes hard to get up for fighting, an unknown guy like John Ryder, maybe an unheralded guy, if you will, like John Ryder. Might be hard to get up. So you have a difficult time motivating to fight that style, and you have a guy whose specialty is to be able to fight on the inside against big guys. That's not a good combination, So yes, he didn't look good, but Callum has always proven to be somebody who, rises to the occasion when he faces good opposition. And I think he's proved that time and time again. I think he's done it when the chips were down, when it's been time for him to step up, whether it was in Madison Square Garden, Saudi Arabia, it was time for him to perform. He did. So I'm guessing that, Canelo brings out the beast in him, brings out the best in him, and Canelo is going to have to be at his best as well. And it's another interesting matchup. And Callum is going to have to be adept at handling the inside work. He's going to have to handle that inside work. If he doesn't handle that inside work, it could be an easy night for Canelo. Has to be able to handle that, and then he'll give Canelo all kinds of trouble.
I look forward to it. I think it's a very good fight when you look at the category super middleweight division right now. There's not too many guys who are going to be better than Callum Smith. Some people maybe would have liked to have seen Billy Joe Saunders. It had been agreed upon with Canelo in the past. Down the road, maybe, but I think for now, look, I hope we get a great fight, and I think somebody needs to challenge Canelo the way since Golovkin, it hasn't really happened since the Golovkin fight, and I think Callum Smith could present definitely some challenges, of course, to Canelo. I look forward to it, and I think a lot of fans do as well.
As a side note, Billy Joe Saunders is a nightmare for any human at 160, 168. It's a nightmare. Like, you have to be a really, 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 really good fighter, maybe bordering on great, to beat Billy Joe Saunders. And even if you are and you do win, you're in for a long, horrific night of frustration and problems. And Billy Joe Saunders can fight.
That awkward southpaw style, no doubt about it. And the
More
just
than
local
it's skilled southpaw, not just awkward. It's skilled, skilled.
on the local front, I want to end with this, Russ, because we're running out of time here. There's a fight over the weekend in Rimouski. It's local fights. It's a 140-pound kind of this mini tournament. Carré d'As, it's being called in French, from Eye of the Tiger. And you have Ulysse fighting Mathieu Germain, Junior Ulysse, that is. And you're going to have Steve Cloquet on the undercard fighting David Theroux. It's an interesting perspective that we're getting these local fights kind of as a byproduct of the pandemic, because prior to that, a lot of these fighters would not have been willing to face each other, and it would have been on different paths towards possibly championship fights. And I think it's intriguing for the fans. But what do you think? Can we expect more local fights? Because in the past, we've had some excellent ones, and fans have always tuned in locally, sometimes for more local attraction. I mean, there was a lot more buzz for a Hilton Ouellet than there was for Timothy Bradley fighting Kendall Holt at the Bell Center for a unification title fight. And it was almost a ghost town. But people for local fights, they support them. We're going to get Germain Ulysse. We're going to get Theroux Claguette, and then the winners will face off against each other. The local scene, though, going forward, do you think the pandemic, will we see this going forward, or you think because it's a one-off, once things get back to normal, we won't see the local fights anymore?
Well,
or not as much as we should?
I hope that's not the case. And, I'll have to tell you that sadly, God rest his soul, Regis Levesque knew that was the secret to success in Quebec. That was the secret to putting asses in seats when you had both corners who had their fans in the building. That was the key to selling tickets, and this was a recipe that has been proven time and time again, especially in Quebec. That works. And we have the fighters. That's the beauty of it, is that we have the fighters to make that happen. I'm happy that Eye of the Tiger is doing this initiative and putting it on. But the reason I think why the wheels came off of that is I'm going to blame Groupe Yvon Michel and Interbox back in the day. Pick your poison as to who you want to blame more. But I can name you fighters that should have met and never did, because again, on a smaller scale here in Quebec, as we were talking earlier in a worldwide discussion, no one wanted to fight the other guy's guy. They didn't want to fight the other guy's guy. The heavyweights, David Cadieux, Jean-François Bergeron, Patrice Lheureux, didn't fight each other at their best. Jean didn't fight Boutte at his best. He should have.
Never fought Stevenson.
We had a chance to make history by Boutte being champion of the world at 168, challenge Jean, champion of the world at 175, a no-risk fight for Boutte moving up, wants to avenge the defeat of his friend Adrian Diaconu. It would have made a gazillion dollars. Didn't happen. Otis Grant on the comeback should have fought Eric Lucas. Eric Lucas goes and fights Mikkel Kessler in Denmark. Those decisions made altered the landscape of boxing in Quebec. And it seemed to be the norm that, you don't have to fight your guy. You don't have to fight the local guy. I'm glad that this fight is happening. You should have to clean out your province before you start venturing on to the world scene. And you have the people here. There are some fighters who didn't have the luxury of being able to do that, and Otis Grant was one of them. Didn't have the luxury to fight here because none of the guys would fight him. So he had to take his career on the road. But that's a one-off. You have to be able to clear out your division here. The belt, the Canadian title should mean something. Being champion here and beating all the guys in your division should mean something. The fact that somebody like Tony Lewis, Germain, they haven't met each other on their way up doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make business sense, and it doesn't make boxing sense. So I'm glad they're doing it now, and I hope that when we come back and there's crowds back in, and we're able to, that's going to continue, because that's going to put asses in seats.
Amen. Prediction quickly. Do you think Ulysse, who's the favorite by pretty much everyone out of the 4 in the tournament, Germain presents a different style. Ulysse, we know, can take pauses and fight sometimes and fight hard every minute of every round. Do you think Ulysse is the favorite as the betting favorite would be?
I think you would have to make Ulysse the favorite. Good puncher, good style. If he gets going, it can be hard to hit and he can throw. If he starts going, if he does what he did last fight, throwing single shots at a time, could be a problem. The only thing you could say about Germain, good, fast hands, quick, nice style. At some point, he's got to get Ulysse to respect him. That's going to be the key, get him to respect him a little bit. And that could be the hard part in the fight for him. But, when you're not a big puncher, you've got to have a lot of other great skills. I think it's an exciting fight. And I think that's what makes this fight such a great matchup, and why, if this would have been live and we would have had press conferences and radio and building up this fight, and they would have been building it for a while, that these guys are going to meet, I think would have put, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people in to come see this fight, and would have been a hell of a night of local boxing of 2 guys from here, world-class fighters going against each other here. And we're not going to see. But I think I'd have to agree with you. You'd have to make Ulysse, especially when you consider what he's done on the world scene. I think you'd have to make him the favorite going in.
And with that, Russ, I think it's all for tonight. I'm gonna let you go, and I don't know if you have a pool playing in your basement there. And I think next week, let's cross our fingers here, and hopefully nothing happens weird. But theoretically, at this time next week, we'll be speaking while you'll be live in Los Angeles for the Roy Jones-Mike Tyson fight. So that's going to be the majority of the show next week. The conversation is going to be about the Roy Jones-Mike Tyson fight. But for now, we're going to keep that as a bit of a tease. It's going to be fun, I think, next week.
So is this when you say this, it's a wrap?
Oh, is that the signature keyword? Do I need to have?
Oh, I don't know. I just thought about now. That's it. That's a wrap.
Good night and good luck. That was one of the signature phrases in the past of.
What's that?
Good night and good luck. I think that was one of them.
Good night and good luck. That could work as well. But okay, next week is Jones and Tyson, so that's going to be interesting. I'm going to be very anxious to talk about that fight and eager to talk about it. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at that fight from a human perspective, and from as a man, and what this means to a lot of people as well. So I'm going to look forward to talking to you from LA.
I can't believe we're going to be talking about Roy Jones, Mike Tyson in 2020, but we will. It'll be fun, and we'll talk next week, Russ.
You got it, brother. Have a good one.